Good morning, Director of Programs, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to have this opportunity to participate in this panel discussion on climate change education. I'll be in particular speaking to climate change education from the Zambian context and the point of view. But I also know that these issues do not only affect Zambia, but affects the Southern African country. And I think as I speak, we can also relate to a number of these. My names are Justin Lupele. I'm speaking to you from Lusaka, Zambia. Just the overview of my presentation, I'll look at the knowledge policy from the international level and the national level. I'll also look at the practice gap. What are the gaps in the practice of climate change education? Also look at the available opportunities that we can seize to ensure that we have comprehensive climate change education, not only in Zambia, but beyond. Then let's look at the knowledge policy. Education as a response to climate change. What does that mean to us? Education provides skills, knowledge, and it sets the right attitude for people world over to take action. Without education, there will be no action towards climate change and its effects. So we need education across sectors, from education sector to more specialized agricultural, forestry, and energy, and so on. The need for education has been highlighted in a number of initiatives, such as the Earth Summit, the UNFCCC, in particular Article 6, and the Doha Work Program, the Kyoto Protocol, and in reference to Article 10. The Paris Agreement of 2016, the Durban Forum on Capacity Building, the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002, the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. All these have shaped the way we respond and even understand climate change over the years. And so we still draw on these to develop local policies, but more so that most of the SADC countries are signatories to a number of these global initiatives. National Climate Change Learning Strategy. So, as a response to climate change, Zambia, with support of the United Nations Development Program and United Nations Institute for Training and Research, have developed the National Climate Change Learning Strategy. I'm privileged to have led this process, working with different people and experts across sectors in Zambia. The strategy aims to build capacity of individuals and institutions in climate change learning with a view to empower the general citizen to take action on the effects of climate change. We want to see a situation where corporate managers have a knowledge of climate change and how that affects their productivity, for example. Want to have an idea of a teacher in a classroom, a trainer in a college or polytechnic has this knowledge. So the development of the strategy was informed by studies and policies such as the National Policy on Climate Change, the Study on Information Needs Assessment and Identification Gaps in Climate Change in Zambia, the National Adaptation Plan of Action, and the nationally determined contribution towards the Paris Agreement. So these are some of the policies and studies that have informed the development of the National Climate Change Learning Strategy, which is in its final stages before the implementation. Under the Ministry of General Education, in terms of policy, the Zambia Education Curriculum Framework of 2013, which was launched in 2014, recognizes education for sustainable development, environmental education, and climate change as some of the key cross-cutting issues that must be taught from early childhood education, primary and through to secondary schools. May I add here that it also must be taught in teacher training colleges, as these fall under the Ministry of General Education. In particular, if I may quote, the curriculum framework notes that, and I quote, climate change is an ecological problem as well as a social problem because all societies are affected in one way or another. For this reason, it is important that the school curriculum provides for this education so that learners become aware of the ecological aspects of the climate crisis and learn how to contribute towards preventing and combating the issue. End of quote. Shall we move to higher education? So the Ministry of Higher Education oversees university education, technical education, vocation and entrepreneurship training, TVET, and science, technology and innovation. All the three sectors have important roles to play in the implementation of climate change learning in their particular programs. May I just add here that in the Ministry of Higher Education policy, it is very clear that there is a mismatch and uncoordinated efforts. While the Ministry of Higher Education does oversee university education and other technical education, there are many other trainings that do take place, say in the Ministry of Agriculture. They run their own specialized programs. The Ministry of Health train health personnel in their own programs. We have the National Institute for Public Administration, which also runs its own programs in public and policy matters. So unfortunately, though Ministry of Higher Education is supposed to oversee these, they are specialized institutions that run on their own within their line ministry. This kind of knowledge gap and the practice itself, I think, is common in most of the SADC country. A number of you will agree with me. So in terms of Zambia, through the 7th National Development Plan, Zambia has domesticated and aligned the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, to the national plans and priorities. SDG 4 is well articulated in Pillar 4 of the 7th National Development Plan, which is also known as the Enhancing Human Capital Development. We see that other SDGs such as 7, 9, 12, and 13 speak to targets in science and technology and innovation. And so these have come to influence the way that climate change is dealt with in particular sectors. What are the practice gaps? In terms of gaps in higher education, there's a lack of funds to support climate change learning programs within the higher education institutions. If you peruse through the curricula and syllabuses of higher education curriculum, you will notice that complex topics of climate change, such as RED, the carbon markets, climate change and population dynamics, international law to address climate change, are rarely, if at all, covered by programs offered in higher education institutions. There is also inadequate climate change information knowledge and long-term period data available to researchers, to planners, to policymakers, and even to the general public. Lack of awareness, education, and training to deal with the negative impacts of climate change for Zambia, to understand the local climate better, is also one such gaps. In terms of general education, though climate change is recognized in the Zambia education curriculum framework, as I have already said, there is also a general lack of awareness about the need for a comprehensive climate change education curriculum. In other ways, to translate this policy on education curriculum framework into action. There is also a lack of climate change teaching and learning materials in primary, secondary schools, and even tertiary education. One of the biggest challenges is that the curriculum developers themselves, whose responsibility is to develop curricula and regulate what gets into the education system, and whose other responsibility is to interpret the policy of the general education, lack the knowledge and skills to integrate climate change education in early childhood education and primary and secondary education. In fact, as we develop the National Climate Change Learning Strategy, one of the things that we have planned is to ensure that the curriculum developers and curriculum specialists are particularly targeted so that they get the necessary skills to understand in more general climate change, and particularly to look at issues of pedagogical processes and how that can be integrated in our schools. What are the opportunities? At national level, Zambia has put in place legal and policy frameworks to support the implementation of climate change. Some of them I've mentioned, like the National Policy on Climate Change, and all these are put, and several others are put in key sectors of development as a response to global protocols and conventions such as the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, but also as a response to the effects of climate change, because like other countries in the region and beyond, Zambia has not been spared from the effects of climate change that come in terms of droughts, in terms of floods, and also the rise in temperature over the period of, a number of years. The newly developed National Climate Change Learning Strategy provides impetus to the integration of climate change education in key sector plans, and we want to see how this will then change the landscape of climate change education in the country. In terms of the education sector, the Ministry of Higher Education Policy recognizes ESD and most of the SDGs as key to the implementation of climate change. I've already mentioned SDG 4 on education, and now SDG 13 on climate change highlight the importance of education's role in climate change responses. And so we need to teach climate change education. Again, already mentioned, the Zambia Education Curriculum Framework provides an opportunity for climate change education in Zambia. It needs the resources and the political will to actualize its goals. Thank you so much for your attention.